All right. Um, it is 1 minute past 12 p.m. In Central Europe, 11:01 a.m. in the UK. Welcome to this new webinar of Antevorta Foundation. It is the very first of 2025. We had a very successful 2024, plenty of events, articles, contributions. The foundation grew quite dramatically, and we're very happy to start in the wake of a successful 2024. So happy New Year, everyone. Happy Chinese New Year, happy Lunar New Year to everyone celebrating, like my wife, who's Vietnamese. And thank you very much again to Professor Francesco Moscone for moderating yet another webinar with us. Today, we have Professor Moscone as a moderator from Brunel University of London and Foscari University of Venice. We have Professor Georgios Batsakis from the Alba Graduate Business School, the American College of Greece, and Brunel University of London, and Dr. Bidit from Sheffield University Management School. Both, actually, the three of them are very, very important contributors to the foundation. Please read their articles on our website and social networks. This webinar is a joint initiative between Brunel University of London, Antevorta Foundation, and Foscari University of Venice, and it is sponsored by the Italian Ministry of University and Research with a grant which is number P2022BNNEY. Today's webinar is about a pretty topical matter that is SMEs, small and medium enterprises, internationalization, digitalization, and gender diversity, unlocking growth potential. The timing couldn't have been better considering President Donald Trump's statements about some of these issues. So I leave the floor to you, Francesco, if you want to introduce our speakers, and we'll get the ball rolling. And I thank you very much. I'll be listening to you in the background. But before that, I would like to remind everyone that this webinar is being recorded. So if you don't feel comfortable being recorded, your name might show as an attendee. We have to ask you to kindly leave now. Otherwise, you agree by the terms and conditions of Antevorta Foundation, and this webinar will be recorded. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Federico, for organizing this event. Once again, it is a pleasure to work with you and for Antevorta, with your wonderful team. And today is a pleasure to have here with us also two colleagues of mine, but also, most importantly, my friends, Georgios and Bidit, who will be talking about ethnic entrepreneurship and technologies in general in terms of digitalization for SMEs. But let me talk a little bit about the context. In our previous webinar, we said lots of things about the economy in Europe. The economy in Europe is lagging behind when compared to superpowers like China and the US. We're lagging behind in terms of productivity, in terms of investments in technologies like AI, open AI, you name it. And we know how important it is that medical technologies, has to be adopted, because otherwise we're not going to grow. We're not going to grow in any sector. And that's the weakness part of Europe. But Europe has got lots of other good things, like, for example, is fighting for having a better world in terms of welfare, in terms of inequality. When compared to the US, I said in our previous webinar, we are doing better than the US and China when it comes to inequality. And I also said that when you read the Draghi's report, you will see there is a lot of geographical differences, variation in terms of inequality between countries and within countries. But the good things, although we are not growing that fast when compared to our neighbors in this very competitive global world, the good thing is that still Europe remains a big, enormous economy, powerful economy. You know, if you look at some stats like the global GDP, the share of global GDP, Europe has got 17% in terms of global GDP. And that's exactly the same percentage that China has. So we come second only after the US with the 26, 27% of the global GDP. I mean, in Europe, we have something like 440 million of consumers. We're talking about 22, 23 millions of SMEs, of which 90, 80% are, cover all the business in Europe. And they account for almost 2/3 of the workforce in terms of employment. The Eurostat in 2022 has explicitly said that there are 31 million of businesses, of which in Europe, of which 99.8% are represented by SMEs with a number of employees below 250. So it's massive, this economy in Europe. And if you look at the turnover, it accounts for half of European overall turnover, with 63, 64% of the labor force coming from SMEs across different sectors. So there is no doubt that SMEs represent the backbones of many national economies of Europe, of UK, and many other countries. But look, there are some issues related to SMEs that are, let's say, specific to SMEs when compared to larger firms, larger enterprises. For example, SMEs have some difficulties, more difficulties, I would say, to access to capital. They have more difficulties in terms of diversification. And when it comes a shock, like an unexpected event, like a financial economic shock, they have more difficulties in scaling down further. So we need to understand better what drives a typical SME in terms of productivity and in terms of performance. We know in the literature of business management and economics that part of the drivers of the productivity of SMEs comes from financial indicators like liquidity, like indebtedness, profitability. But net of these factors, there are other important factors that are part of this story that explain this productivity of SMEs, such as the probability of a typical SME to go bust within a sector. And there are a lot of information that are not necessarily quantitative, they're also qualitative, that you won't see on the balance of accounts, but they're important to predict the probability for an SME to go bust. In fact, banks like the Lloyds, when they assess the credit score of an SME, they take into account a lot of financial indicators, but also indicators that are outside the balance of accounts. Now, net of all these factors that will drive the performance of SMEs, there is another important aspect that I would like to talk about today, and it has to do with the governance of SMEs. In other words, it matters who are the directors of these organizations, their age, so their experience, their gender. It also matters their ethnicity. And of course, it also matters the adoption of technology. But when you look at some characteristics of the directors, it's striking to notice that the percentage of females within SMEs is still very low, very extremely low. Despite the fact that in the literature, we know that the higher is the percentage of females in an SME, and in SMEs, the higher is going to be its performance, its productivity. And the reason is because women bring a unique style in terms of leadership. Women are pretty good in conforming to certain rules that may come at the national or European level, like, for example, rules that have to do with the environmental sustainability of our planet, of Europe in general. They're very good in investing in technologies. But again, you find a very difficult situation where the percentage of women are still very low. And they wish, I mean, the European Commission wishes that by next year, by mid next year, the percentage of women on these boards will be something like 40%. If you look at the executive, for example, directors. But Europe is still very fragmented in many dimensions. For example, there are some countries that have used a very soft way to deal with the gender diversity, like Spain and the Netherlands. They will let the SMEs regulate themselves. It's up to them, according to these countries, to find a good balance between women and men on SMEs. And I'm talking about listed SMEs. While in some other countries like Italy, Germany, Norway, it would be kind of, let me say, not a soft approach, but tough, hard approach in order to get a good representation of women on SMEs boards. And they do that creating a mandatory system. So through quotas that will range between 30% and 40%, they will force listed SMEs to have a fair representation of women on these boards in these SMEs. Now, look, I think that I'm not against quotas. Let me be straight, let me be clear, because we haven't done a lot for years. I mean, Western countries are doing much better in many respects. I'm talking about Europe and the UK when compared to other countries around the world. When we talk about gender inequality, we're not doing that much, I would say. And because we're not doing that much, so quotas should be there. Having said that, we should aim for something better that has to do with the context where these SMEs operate. A better, for example, welfare system, through paternity and maternity leave, through packages like child benefits. Only by changing the culture and these packages, we will be able, I think, to bring back what is called meritocracy. It is only through meritocracy, which means making sure that women and men compete in a fair environment, and they're not kind of discriminated, because nowadays what happens, not everywhere, but in many business, and I know as a fact, the first question a job interview would be like, are you gonna have a child? You know, in a situation where fertility rate is zero, also becomes very important to understand how to help families and women to participate and be more active in the labor market. Now, I said that we need to understand the boards and their structures, and ethnicity becomes also extremely important. It is a matter of fact that in many countries like the US, Europe, the UK, during these last decades and more, we witnessed an increase in immigration. But there are some countries in Europe, for example, that are anti-immigration. I mean, they don't want immigrants for one reason or the other one. I can mention shame and, you know, some of them, but I won't do right now here. But the thing is that, as I said earlier on, fertility rate is zero. And if fertility rate is zero, and we are facing an aging society, we will need more than ever, you know, the contribution of immigrants in our economy. And by the way, there is a literature in economics and in business telling us how important immigrants are. So we need to understand more ethnicity and ethnic entrepreneurship. That's why today I would like to ask to Bidit to tell us more about the importance of ethnic entrepreneurship in our economies, why they're important, not just for the firms and our society, but also for our economies at a local, meso, and country level?
Thank you very much, Francesco. That's a very topical and very important issue for most Western economies right now. And as you have said, that immigration is often vilified and often looked at as from a critical perspective, but at the same time, the benefits of immigration is not often properly assessed. And also, regardless of the pros and cons of immigration, we also have to accept the sheer reality. Almost half of Londoners living in current London either are born outside or they're born to parents who were born outside the UK. That particular stat can tell you that how the diversity is shaping up. And when it comes to businesses, ethnic businesses, theoretically, I mean, there's a wealth of literature around ethnic entrepreneurship and ethnic businesses. One reason often ethnic minority people, particularly immigrants, by the way, there are academic differences in terms of how we define immigrants, migrants, refugees, ethnic minorities. So just as a cautionary statement that we should not consider this interchangeably. However, in many occasions, migrants or refugees or first generation immigrants, they prefer to go for opening their own businesses, and that's because of their lack of qualifications, lack of language skills, lack of connectivity with the mainstream societies, which limit their capacity to secure blue collar, white collar jobs, and that's why they prefer to get into entrepreneurship. Currently in the UK, 6.1% SMEs are owned by ethnic entrepreneurs, and across Europe, 2.7 million businesses, and that includes SMEs and large enterprises together, right? And this is actually a huge number. And when it comes to single-owned SMEs in the UK, that percentage is significantly high. So that explains that generally we see ethnic minority people or first-generation immigrants, they embark on businesses, and at the same time they contribute in many ways. One thing that we know that they have that passion and aspiration for growth. They have that desire and appetite for a better life, and at the same time they bring along different ideas, creative means, different cultural ways of doing businesses, and diversify. It's not just about different types of businesses, also how businesses are conducted. So that diversity also enriches generally on, as you have said, Francesco, that on balance, of course, we understand there are significant drawbacks to those as well, which I will, if I have time, I'll explain later on. But on balance, on a grand scheme of events, we can say that this diversity enriches and positively contributes to businesses. Now, at the same time, there is also challenges involved here, and you briefly touched on that about growth potential, about what sort of situational, contextual, and macro-environmental factors they come across. According to the European Commission report, 3 in 5, the way they define ethnic minority people in Europe, had registered some sort of discrimination in their lifetime in Europe, the continent.
Bidit, can you give us some examples of these challenges, these types of discriminations?
Thanks, Francesco. One major challenge is about, if we look at, and that I'm sure Georgios will touch on this issue as well. So there is an intersection, for instance, about ethnicity and women entrepreneurs, right? And when it comes to women, ethnic women, things are even worse. 11% of women in the UK manage to get venture funding. And for Black women in particular, that percentage is only 0.40. £25,000 annual business in revenue, median amount for Black women entrepreneurs, which is 1/3 of the same case for a white women entrepreneur. So just to give you an idea that within ethnic societies, often in some societies or many, women are not properly considered to be bread earners, right? So for them, having to own business is not socially appreciated. So that's a challenge from their own social cultural point of view. On the other hand, from a different point of view, it's like they are already marginalized, or they are not properly equipped, they do not have the social capital and qualification in order to drive their own business's growth. So that's one side. In general, amongst ethnic entrepreneurs, these are inherent challenges: a lack of social capital, not being able to drive their growth through upscaling and upskilling themselves, and also often feeling disenfranchised and excluded from mainstream businesses. And I can come back later on to explain how these business ecosystems work, and ethnic minority people, they often create their own business ecosystem because they often do not have access to the mainstream. Thanks.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Following to what you just said, do you think that there are other differences when you compare micro and small businesses with medium businesses within this dimension of ethnicity? There are specific, issues with this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that is of course there, and also, for instance, the micro businesses which are often owned by very few people, or sometimes self-owned and self-run businesses. So those have got a problem in terms of sourcing capital. Those have problems in terms of developing entrepreneurial skills, vision, understanding about the natural trajectory of the economy. If I give an example of, for instance, Bangladeshi restaurant communities in the UK, although they led the catering business in Indian catering industry in the UK, but majority of those businesses struggle from lack of growth, because after a certain point they do not understand the essence of taking risks, diversifying their product portfolio, having a future-oriented vision, which are required for entrepreneurial development and for the growth of their businesses. So that's one side. Also, from a different point of view, when it comes to building that ecosystem, often they are reliant on engaging with people or businesses from their own community, which also limit their ability to expand the horizon and being able to integrate with the mainstream. So when you talk about consumer or individuals' interaction with wider society, we have got this wealth of literature around how different ways people actually acculturate. Similarly, businesses also seem to have marginalization. They are sometimes separated. You wouldn't find too many examples of integrated. However, the integrated ethnic minority businesses are more likely to succeed and grow, who have that cultural interaction and as well as business interaction with the wider society.
Yeah. Talking about integration, and I want to ask you this question that has to do with the policy interventions. A lot of time we talk about integration. Sometimes we know what it means. Sometimes we have a vague understanding. Sometimes a more legal understanding, more economic understanding. But how would you make sure from a policy perspective that this integration really takes place so that the likelihood, as you said, of succeeding for ethnic entrepreneurship will increase?
There is a lot of debate and discussion around how integration. So, by the way, when we talk about integration in terms of PSA, psychology, sociology, and anthropology literature, we talk about it's about give and take. It's about ethnic minority people retaining their identities while at the same time adopting some aspects of the mainstream cultural attributes. And that is well underpinned by the ethos of multiculturalism. although it is quite a debated topic in itself. The likes of Canada, for instance, they have hugely tried multiculturalism, and the right-wing political spectrum, the right-wing part of the political spectrum actually criticizes multiculturalism as a failed sort of social experiment, right? But we have also seen the example of interculturalism. That is, from a policy point of view, to my experience, to my understanding, that may work better, where you are not considering it as a blurred sort of a salad bowl sort of situation where everyone is just kind of integrating without realizing that together they also constitute a single identity. So it's kind of a combination between assimilationist approach, what the US has adopted over the years, and multiculturalism, which is more sort of towards the left. So it's a kind of combination of both, where people would appreciate the fact that they have to retain their identity, or they love to retain their identity, but at the same time, they have to embrace some of the mainstream values which will engage and connect them with the mainstream. So that's from a policy point of view, that sort of philosophy should underpin the policy formulation.
Thank you very much, Bidit. Hopefully, I'll get back to you later. I just want to ask a question to Georgios right now in terms of technology digitalization. I mean, it is, again, in Europe, we talk a lot about the lack of technologies, of digitalization. Italy has got a recovery fund of 200 billion of euro, and part of these resources have to be employed for digitalization. You know, in the UK, if you are admitted in a hospital and then everything goes well, and then it happens at time t+1 that you are admitted in another hospital, they won't know anything about your records. So there's a lack of digitalization in the public system, but also within SMEs. We talk a lot, but still we are behind. And then I just came across this wonderful manifesto written also from a colleague of ours, Professor Robin Jarvis. Is a manifesto called The Genesis on Productivity, and he talks about micro entities, SMEs, and the importance of digitalization. So my question is, why digitalization is that important, and how will help? Please give us some examples, these SMEs through these platforms from social media and so forth, how they will help. I mean, we know that the barriers are lower in terms of costs because of these new technologies, but how can really these SMEs take advantage of these platforms, innovations, and how long it will take us before we really innovate in terms of adopting? You know, we're not talking about new necessarily innovation, but adopting existing innovation.
Yeah, that's a good question. I have to say that digitalization is a very broad concept, and both SMEs and other individuals perceive it, in a much different way. For SMEs, I think the main idea here is that they're trying to first become much more familiar with digitalization and the perks, the benefits it brings to their business. And second, they try to be more competitive with it. So they try to gain, let's say, a strong competitive advantage that they can leverage not only domestically, but mainly, I would say, internationally. So just to give you some figures to understand that we still lag behind in Europe in terms of e-commerce activity and how much these companies, these SMEs, spend in terms of investing in digitalization and e-commerce or other ICT related investment. We can draw on a recent report by Eurostat, which places European SMEs at a level where almost nearly 20%, maybe a bit less than 20%, were engaging with selling online. Although we think that this is not a bad, let's say, figure, I would probably place it as a lukewarm figure, not a great figure, given the steps that have been made in the last 5 to 7 years globally. For example, if you look into China or other emerging markets, you will see that the progress that firms have made in terms of utilizing digital platforms and digitalization related tools has been of exponential growth, exponential, let's say, rising. But this is not the case in Europe. We're standing at this level. 1 out of 5 SMEs is selling online. The good news, I think, is these related to how SMEs try to benefit from digital channels when they sell abroad, when they try to approach foreign customers. So according to Eurostat, again, there's another interesting statistic saying that more than half of the European SMEs that use digital channels or platforms or other digital means to export, to sell abroad, as, let's say, as their primary method of approaching foreign customers, do so, and they do so very well, right? Which is very important in my eyes, at least, right? So I think the question here is how can we incentivize, how can we drive even more SMEs towards that kind of pathway of embracing digital channels first, upgrading their methods, their equipment, their skills towards becoming more digital oriented. And second, why not use these skills, these capabilities in terms of investing in something that can give them an international scope, which can also help them sustain a long-term competitive advantage. To be more specific, if we can look into digital platforms or digital means in general, I think this is very broad indeed. Maybe what we can do is we can break it down to products and services. Both sides, both types of sales are important. However, the marketplace for products is very different from the marketplace for services. And certainly for products, the most important aspect here is the fact that product-related, product-based SMEs are using digital platforms as an e-commerce, let's say, gateway. They do that because they want to reach customers more easily in a more cost-effective manner. They can monitor the feedback that they get from customers more easily. They can create some sort of traction for their business. They can utilize the reviews that the customers provide as a way to provide trust for their organization, for their business activity. And of course, we're not talking about very unknown platforms. We're talking about platforms like Amazon, eBay. If we're talking about more specific handcrafted items, Etsy is a well-known platform. And this is not only the case in Europe. I mean, we have Mercado Libre in Latin America. We have Alibaba and Temu in China. However, in Europe, this is, let's say, the main way of utilizing digital platforms. For service providers, I think the approach is a bit different because service providers are interested in finding customers as being more B2B oriented, in finding global clients, right? And these global clients are looking for more specialized, let's say, services, specialized expertise. And here, in the last years or so, we have seen platforms like Upwork or Fiverr or other, well-known platforms which are being utilized, and they provide a great access to a global client base, so that service providers, for example, the Greek digital marketing agency, right, which has a limit in terms of how many clients it can acquire domestically in Greece. It can be quite competitive in terms of offering services at a really good price and at a really good quality these days, related to, for example, search engine optimization or other digital marketing services. And in such a way, they can attract clients from developed countries, global marketplaces like the US, the UK, or the Asian region, which is growing exponentially. And this is a very different way that service-based SMEs try to utilize digital platforms. And the third probably category is a much broader category that can probably fit to the needs of both product-based and service-based SMEs, providers of products and services. So this can be, for example, social media tools, anything related to our everyday, let's say, social media activity, things like Instagram, TikTok, or more business-oriented like LinkedIn. We have seen tremendous examples of firms which have started as very small and they simply utilize in a very smart way, a very effective way, social media to gain customers from abroad, right? Because they have been extremely good in strategizing their digital communication. Fintech solutions, which are extremely important. For example, we have all experienced, the option these days of the buy now, pay later model. Talking about Klarna, Stripe, all these well-known fintech startups, companies that have been integrated in e-commerce these days. From the supply perspective, it's always a crowdfunding process where previously we talked about buy now, pay later. Crowdfunding is a bit different. It's about raising capital and gauging market interest before you launch in a foreign market at a full scale. So it's not buy now, pay later. It's about paying now and you get the product later. So in a sense, it's a pre-selling process for many SMEs, for many startups also to sell their products even before they go to the real market. So yeah, we can talk about many other reasons why digital platforms are being utilized, but I think these are the among the most important ones.
Absolutely. One more question, then I want to go back to Bidit. It looks like we have a lot of information nowadays. Firms buy data, they sell data. We talk about internationalization, importance of these platforms, and so forth. But what do you think we should do to make sure that people understand how to analyze all this data and take care of the capacity in terms of these massive data sets that most of the time are very different in terms of unit of aggregation and so forth? How, do we have this expertise? Do SMEs have some chance to understand this data from an analytical point of view so that they can then better understand their markets and decide whether to penetrate those other countries or not? What is your idea on this? The question is more like, can we take advantage, exploit, and I'm talking about the SMEs, can take advantage of all these data sets, or they don't know what they're doing in some sense. They don't have the ability of the skills. Do they need business schools? Do they need someone or consultants? Do they have the money to pay consultants to take advantage of all this data that is there? What is your intake?
Is a question for me or for Georgios?
For Georgios, but yeah. And then I go back and I come back to you, yeah.
Sorry, I thought it was for Bidit, because I think you said Bidit in the beginning, and I was. I think data is very important. Data at the aggregate level, they are extremely important. First for economists, for those who are policymakers, who are interested in understanding the trends and the statistics around, about how globalization, how digitalization, how SME growth is being developed, is growing. So you can see that from the perspective of an academic or policy, let's say, from a policy person, from a policy individual, an expert who is interested in understanding trends. These can actually provide a much greater understanding to those who are not really interested or are not able to know what is happening as a megatrend or as a gigatrend, right? So what we do as academics or as policymakers, or advisors, or whatever role each one of us has, is understanding these trends. By understanding these trends, we're also able to deep dive into more important aspects that relate to more specific strategies, more specific policies that can better educate not only our students, but also can give very useful information to governments. Previously, we talked about a manifesto that Robin shared with us, I think a few days ago. It was extremely interesting to read. I think one of the good things that I enjoy in the UK is that the government is always trying to be close to the universities, to those who are knowledgeable about a subject matter, and they try to benefit from this process of acquiring the best possible information, right? And they draw on that also to develop specific policies. So data is extremely important, and it's extremely important to us, I believe. I think here we're all quantitative researchers, and we rely a lot on this kind of data.
Yeah, I was more thinking about chartered accountants, bodies of chartered accountants at European level, at country level, helping the SMEs through, a board of experts like you in order to advise then SMEs, because they don't have sometimes the possibility to understand whether that market works or not. But I think that you answered to this question in a great way. Thank you so much. But Bidit, last question for you. You talked earlier on about the ethnic entrepreneurship and the interaction of ethnic entrepreneurship with gender. But could you comment a little bit about digitalization and ethnic entrepreneurship? What kind of effects can we get out of this interaction in terms of productivity, performance of SMEs?
Yeah, I will actually link my response to what Georgios just mentioned. And as we know about quadruple helix, right, that there are 4 different major kind of contributors within the policy landscape, and universities, so the higher education being one, can really, really make a significant contributions. And that also has to be embedded within the policy vision. I mean, as we observed over the span of 80s and 90s, the reason that the US is here right now, they acquired talents from around the world. The US higher education sector attracted talents from all around the world, which eventually contributed to the development of the Silicon Valley that we see now, right? I think that's where Europe and the UK haven't had enough. Sorry, it's me, or there is a...
Yeah, sorry. Absolutely. You're completely right. Yeah. If we see and observe what happened in the US and the way they managed to grow, it is because of these talents. I remember, for example, President Obama a few years ago, when he was president, saying, we don't just want to give MBAs or titles or PhD to people coming from abroad. We want them to become American, getting back to this integration, because he knows, and many people know how important it is to retain those talents, to create then innovation and I completely agree with you. Yeah, absolutely.
So sorry about the technical distraction. So something,
Yeah, it's okay.
so some device was on, which is not my device anyway. Yeah. So that's one aspect. Sorry, yeah, it's something that I don't own, but it's somewhere here. I have to hide it somewhere. Sorry about that. Yeah.
No problems at all.
Because I even don't know how to turn it off, right?
It's a challenges of digitalization.
It is.
That is true. That's true.
Right. And when it comes to digitalization, so the other thing that is crucial here is that because where internationalization these days don't just happen of the physical transfer of knowledge or products. So the internationalization instead can happen when they are connected through various platforms, various digital tools. And that's where digital platforms can enable local SMEs to think globally. At the same time, ethnic entrepreneurs and women entrepreneurs in particular, who have social limitation, who are not often encouraged or appreciated by their culture or their communities to come out of their house, so they can have that connectivity, and also with their limited capacities they can still take their goods to the wider market segment.
Fantastic. Okay, wonderful. Federico, would you like to ask some questions or pick up some questions from the floor if there are any?
Absolutely. So number of things. There is a Q&A tool here on Zoom. I forgot to mention that at the beginning of our conversation. There is already a question here. So let's take that question here and have a few remarks also. But before I forget, when we talked about demographics and the impact that demographics can have on one country's economy, there's a beautiful paper, one of the very first papers that was written for the website of Antevorta Foundation, I think by you amongst others, Francesco, about Korea and the impact of taxation on denatalization and demography. So I encourage you all to go to the website and look for it. It's one of the very first publications that we have there. Let's take the first question from the audience, and then we'll go back to our chat. Varun Shori, I don't know if you can read it. I don't know whether this question is addressed to any of us in particular, any of our panelists. Varun Shori writes, isn't that quota system just tokenism or positive discrimination? I wonder what Varun means by tokenism in this case, but probably Bidit has an answer. Thank you.
I feel
you want to answer?
Sorry, Francesco, you want to?
No, by all means. By all means, yeah.
Sorry, I mean, this is not positive discrimination, rather it's more sort of affirmative action. And this is needed in order to support the ones who are marginalized, who are disadvantaged and underprivileged. And as part of, as I mentioned about multiculturalism, they have global multiculturalism index rating. And one of the ways to assess, one of the criteria they use is to what extent affirmative actions are applied within a society. And that's why I feel that the word quota can be a little bit does not express the meaning in a proper way. But if it is with an affirmative action in order to, and not either positive action, discrimination is not quite positive either, right? But affirmative action is a way to describe the benefits of this reservation. Thanks.
Can I add one thing on this? That's why I said I'm not against quota. I'm not against, but I am pro a better welfare system, because what we have noticed from the data is that in places where you have quotas, like for example Italy, you won't find a strong, in many cases it depends on where you are in the country, but a strong welfare system. So sometimes it's like not pushing for meritocracy. So you need it, but you need to fix all the rest of the things that are not working, maternity leave, child benefits. You can't work for a firm and then get all your wage to pay for kindergarten for your kids. It can't work like this, you know. The woman will be incentivized to stay at home and not go to work. If you look at the average salary in the UK, for example, you would get this picture that is clear without child benefits, without, you know, support from the firms, without a culture towards a unique interest that does not discriminate anyone. But the fact that we discriminate is obvious and clear. Look at the wage gap between gender still is huge, still is a big problem. So inequality in terms of gender goes towards different directions. So that's why I hope I was clear. I am for quotas, okay, because people tend to continue to discriminate no matter what we say, but we should be proactive in changing and getting a better welfare system.
Yes, there is an additional question I see. Oh, no, sorry. Varun saying thank you. Thank you very much for this. Done. Any further questions from the audience? I would like to give precedence to our audience, of course, especially the younger audience, students that might be attending this webinar. If not, I wonder...
There's a question, Federico.
Oh, sorry.
There's a question from one of my students from the MBA of Brunel Business School.
Hello.
So my name is Sanjit, and I have been following this conversation about the digital transformation processes for SMEs in Europe particularly. And I heard about some 20% figures which were told that it was quite low. So given that there is not any lack of budget, there is no lack of awareness or education, can you please further tell me about the major hurdles? Like, what are the hurdles? Then why is this adoption rate so slow? Because it's not a big deal to get registered in an e-commerce platform or take your business online. We have the knowledge, we have the tools. It's very easy. It's for free. I mean, not free, but it's like cheap. So what are the major hurdles and why is this process slow?
Is this question for me or for Bidit?
I think it's for both, but if you want to answer, I mean,
I can make a start and then
Yes, Georgios,
can
go ahead. Yeah.
chip in or okay, good question. It's Europe is a very fragmented place. So if you try to break down the digitalization capabilities or the ICT, let's say, infrastructure or how much a government is spending on making improvements in digitalization or in terms of upskilling, the digitalization related skills of their workforce, things are very different. That's why, when we do a breakdown, we have the EU average, and then you see a massive, let's say, massive differences between, the highest performing country and the lowest performing country in Europe. So I tend to say that we need to have, let's say, a more balanced approach, and we need to, in Europe at least, because I think the question was for Europe, I think we need to be much more consistent in terms of what we're expecting from countries. You cannot expect the same level of digitalization, digital connectivity, digital related skills that have been gained by professionals and SMEs, for example, in a country like the UK or Scandinavian country like Sweden, which is very advanced in terms of the digitalization, or Finland, and the same kind of expectations from the southeastern part of Europe, which are typically the countries of the European Union that lag behind. So I think the challenges are very much related to what are the main challenges that a small and medium enterprise is facing anyway, which is a lack of finance. It's been a continuous problem, and I would dare to say that things have gone actually back in terms of making improvements. We don't see much of improvement taking place in terms of improving access to finance for SMEs. with a few, let's say, exemptions, mainly startups which are capable of raising funds from venture capitals, which are again based in more developed countries, more, let's say, resource-rich countries. We did not see much of progress there. The other thing is how you educate, how you provide the right skills to the professionals. Okay, nowadays I think digitalization is very much commoditized when it comes to how one can use social media to communicate with potential customers, or to develop a short promo about the business and so on. But this is just a commoditized kind of capability these days, right? Everybody has that. I mean, all of us can have a social media account and use it in a different way. Some of us less effectively, some others more effectively. But what about other things like AI tools? How do you integrate AI tools to make your business more effective, more competitive, being more efficient, at the same time save on important costs of the business, right? How do you use analytics? Do you need to hire someone in a professional business? Do you need to do it in-house by yourself? Do you know how to do it? Do you know what it means to spend a euro or a British pound on analytics, and how much this pound or this euro will return to your business? This is still something that most people do not fully understand. I think this is why we see these limited numbers still in terms of digitalization or e-commerce adoption in SMEs. Right. So I know I have talked a lot. So Bidit, I think you have a lot more to say, because this is also your playing field.
Yeah, thanks, Georgios. Yes, you have covered most. And I just want to add one very important point, is that technology in itself, or digital technology, or any kind of technology in itself, is not a panacea. Technology, innovation, of course, we all appreciate and welcome, but an innovated, a new technology can at the same time coexist with an old technology, and that can lead to widened divide rather than bridging the divide. And that is happening in many cases in the UK and Europe, where some countries and some organizations are forging ahead with their benefit, with their ability to yield the benefits of new technology, such as AI, as Georgios mentioned, whereas other organizations are unable. And that's why, from a policy point of view, that's what we have been researching on. And it's about building that regulated environment where democratized and distributed capability of leveraging AI or any transformative technology that can benefit relatively less resourced organizations, and as Georgios mentioned, also from the European Union's point of view, less resourced countries and nations. So that's where regulated approach is much more required. Otherwise, we will be in a position where some organizations or some countries will be miles ahead the rest, and that will be detrimental to an inclusive development of digitalization. Thanks.
Excellent.
Federico, are there any other questions, or?
I do not see any further questions. I would just make a couple of remarks to close our conversation. One is about the adoption of digitalization in Europe, where probably certain costs, as all of you have pointed out, are too high for small and medium enterprises. And I'll give you a personal anecdote. When my wife and I went to Milan for a few months in the second half of 2021, as we escaped Vietnam due to the effects of the pandemic over there, my wife, being Vietnamese, said, "Oh, we can order this and also that and also that and also that online." I said, "Darling, if we keep on ordering stuff online, you'll get me broke, because delivery costs in Italy, in Milan, are not exactly as low as in Vietnam." So in a way, the fact that certain countries, including China, which is a world power, have cheap costs of labor and logistics and freight forwarding, makes it easier for them to adopt certain tools, whilst in more developed countries like Italy, and I believe many more, it is more difficult simply due to the fact that you have to pay, even though these people are sometimes exploited and underpaid. Yet it is for the consumer quite expensive to adopt these tools, and therefore also for the small and medium enterprises that don't find a market. It's a loop. The other remark that it's more about integration, multiculturalism. Probably Bidit in the beginning mentioned the salad bowl, and I wonder whether a strong national identity helps in actually fostering the inclusion of other cultures. And again, I will give you a personal example. In places that I know quite well, like Singapore and Malta, where I live, I spend 50% of my time in Malta. It is absolutely common to celebrate different religious events. Like these days in Singapore, they're having holidays for the Lunar New Year, but they will have also Muslim festivities, Hindu festivities, etc., Christian festivities. Malta, the same. When I throw a party at my place, I have friends that come from pretty much all over the world. Whilst in Milan, a normal Milanese gathering will have probably somebody from out of Milan or maybe some exotic places like Sicily or Naples, but it wouldn't be as multinational as I can see in these places. Now, the mantra goes that Italians don't really have a strong national identity themselves. We're fragmented in small towns. We have a word that can only be translated into Italian, which is campanilismo, meaning that each goes for their own. Whilst countries like even younger ones like Singapore that have forged such a strong national identity. I don't know if you've ever seen the Pledge of Allegiance of Singapore, which is quite tough. In Italy, we wouldn't have anything like that. On their national day, everybody stands with their hands on their heart and give this Pledge of Allegiance. So there is a very strong sense of identity. And yet, different traditions, different religions, different ethnicities, and even languages can thrive. Is it perhaps a qualitative factor that can impact that, Bidit?
It is actually in a both way. It's I mean, from the UK point of view, I think we have seen significant level of social mobility, and at the same time, although UK does not very concertedly claim that they practice multiculturalism, but when we see Diwali, Eid, Ramadan festivals going along with all celebrated in the central part of London in a very collective way, that kind of alludes to the point that UK supports multiculturalism. But the problem with the multiculturalism is also that how long are we going to see these? How about second, third, fourth generation? So at some point, these communities also have to have a common identity. Yes, we see there was British baker who won a competition, said them at the same time, Bengali, I'm Muslim, I'm British. And I do not see that these three are contradictory to each other. I really love that sort of concept. But at the same time, that Britishness has to be there. And otherwise these communities will fall apart. They will not be connected together. The only thing that connects all these communities is Britishness. And that also is good to keep the far right away. So the more people will have that commonality and that connectivity, the far right rhetorics will lose their currencies. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Bidit. We have a final question, which is, it is actually something that I was thinking myself as one of my remarks. There is an anonymous attendee that asks, will AI help SMEs compete, or will it make the gap with big firms even bigger? My 2 cents, I think it will help, considering what we said earlier when George was replying to Francesco about the difficulty in gathering data and processing data. I believe that AI can be a very helpful tool, but there's just my 2 cents. Maybe George, you want to address this question? I don't know.
Yeah, it's an excellent question because it's still, I think we still live in this is, I would say, uncharted waters. So we still learn about AI. We are quite safe in terms of talking about e-commerce and digitalization in terms of the front end and the back end of the business, right? So in terms of what you can do to improve your company's digital skills so that you can improve the customer journey, or to improve your CRM systems, or other systems in your supply chain. about AI, things are still a bit, liquid, as we can say. Certainly, how I see it as an extremely efficient, productive tool that can actually change the way that can I say it? Well, underrepresented companies in the industry, in the marketplace, can actually try to reach the level, match the level of other companies in terms of important activities like analytics, or how they can improve their inventory management. So AI chatbots, automated inventory management, integrated CRM systems, these are a few examples, or how you can utilize AI for analytics without drawing on expensive, costly, reports coming from consulting firms or marketing agencies or whatever. Right. This is certainly a very a very important step towards democratizing access to knowledge, information, skills that a couple of years ago it was extremely difficult to acquire or to develop or to to draw upon without paying the right the right price for it. So this is how I see it. But in the future, certainly, we don't know what the progress will be with AI, and how bigger companies will be able to to benefit even more than SMEs. But for the time being, this is how I see it personally.
Absolutely. Good. I think we are. No, I don't think. Absolutely. In absolute terms, we're running a few minutes late. All of you can re-watch the recording of this webinar that will be posted shortly on our website and social channels. Francesco, do you have any final remarks? Otherwise, we can wrap it up.
I want to thank you, your team, our wonderful speakers who have been contributing to your blog, and I read all their articles. They're just amazing. Please go to Antevorta's Foundation's website and read Bidit's and George's articles, because they're amazing.
Francesco's.
And let me conclude by saying happy lunar year. As you started, I want to join you for this important celebration around the world.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Francesco. Thank you, Bidit. Thank you, George. And thank you all. Thank you for your unwavering support. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.